But anyway, the question this week was basically, does your practice, what does practice do for OSHA and HIPAA? And I'm sure everybody had a chance to review the list that was attached to the invite. And not surprisingly, a lot of the training is done online nowadays. There's a lot of resources out there that, especially with a large staff with multiple locations, it just makes it a little bit easier to get everybody trained that way. And then for OSHA training, it seems like there's a big number of respondents that said they use their bio-waste service provider to do that, whether it's Stericycle or another one was MedSafe and some others. So there are different ways that you can get your training done without having a staff member to do it. And I can tell you that using a consultant to do your training is probably not the most cost-effective way to get that done, because you figure they're going to charge you at least a hourly rate or a minimum rate, and it could be cost prohibitive, especially for a small practice. So for those of you that are joining the call, tell us how you do your HIPAA training, since that one was answered more so than OSHA. Don't be bashful.
Hi, I'm Monica.
Hi, Monica.
We actually, for HIPAA, we've been using Navola, which is it was recommended by TMLT several years back, and we've been using them. They're now on a WordPress format. It's fine. It was really good, but there hasn't been a whole lot of, for the annual training, the refresh is not, I mean, it's the same training, essentially. It does include the Texas rules, which I'm not sure if everybody does that, but there are Texas specific rules for HIPAA. So it's good, it's worked, but we're actually right in the middle of looking at at a couple of other options for all compliance.
Okay. I saw that Navola in the responses, and I was wondering who had mentioned it. I had not heard of it. And before we started, I Googled it. It's really funny because one of the first things that pops up on my browser was, this may not be a trusted site. And I thought that was funny, only from the aspect that, okay, this is a compliance related website. It's got that thing on there. And it could be just the anti-spyware or whatever that I might have on my computer that flagged that, but it was humorous. How much do they charge for that?
Actually, the odd thing is we haven't been charged this year, so I'm actually having to ask them for an invoice, because we've been using them. I believe the first time we set up, it was $1,500 for 100 users, and then it went down when we renewed to about 900. But since then I have not received any other invoices, so I'm trying to do the right thing and have them send us an invoice so that we can pay up.
Yeah. Has anybody else found any other online resources that might be a little bit less expensive? I've seen some free ones out there before, but you get what you pay for. Sometimes you'll find out that it's just not quite complete. Monica, you brought up an interesting point with the annual or the recurring training is basically the same as the initial training, which I personally don't like, because it's boring. As soon as they open up their mouth and say this is HIPAA, especially if they spell it with 2 P's versus 2 A's, I'm automatically turned off. I'm looking for a female hippopotamus, but they're not in the room. But I did a training recently for a practice, and I did a little bit differently. I wanted to see what they knew before I went in to see what I was going to teach. And it's interesting because you figure that somebody who's been in medical practice for at least 8 to 10 years, they've had HIPAA a couple of times. And it's surprising when you ask them simple questions like, what's a covered entity? Or, give me an example of a covered entity, and they can't tell you it's the physician. You kind of wonder what they really know.
Right.
How about other people's experiences with training for HIPAA? Justin, I'm picking on you because you're visible.
Being with Texas Tech, ours is a much bigger institution. Actually, I didn't respond to the question on purpose because I knew mine would likely not translate well, but actually somebody almost completely hit the nail on the head. They said handled through our HR compliance department, through mandatory annual training and online modules in our network. Completion of these modules are tracked per employee electronic assignment in our system. That is exactly what we do here at Texas Tech. So whoever said that, that was identical to what I would have responded.
I wonder if maybe it was Lindsay Tubbs. Isn't she with Texas
She's
Tech?
with us. She's with Correctional Managed Care now, but she's still part of our system. Yes, sir.
Okay. Maybe she responded.
Could have been, and that's how we do it. So when you go any other outside sources, I'm like, ours are all internally done through the state. So we have to do it every year. We start getting little nasty gram emails when we don't respond or when we haven't done it in a timely manner, and they notify us about 2 months before it comes due, so we can renew it each year. And that actually goes for both HIPAA and OSHA training.
Okay. Well, I'm curious. One of the key things about compliance is you should have a compliance officer in your practice. Do you have a designated person? And better yet, does your staff know who that person is?
Well, I am that dedicated person in our department because it's a relatively small department comparatively to our institution. And I don't know, that's a good question. I know in my previous role with the Department of Surgery, it was a much larger department, and we had our internal HR person, and she would send around things, and everyone knew that Miss LaVoice, she's been here for like 35 years. Everyone knew that Miss LaVoice was their compliance officer because she had done it for the entirety of most people's careers here. In our smaller department, it's been less of an issue, so I couldn't answer if they know it's me because I haven't really had to get on to anybody much.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's important that people understand who it is, and maybe worthwhile, maybe in an organization like yours is large, putting up posters around just to state who it is. Now, do y'all have a like a dedicated secure line where people can send information to you if they foresee a violation or anything to keep it anonymous?
Yes, that line is given both in the information during the annual training as well as during their onboarding for new employees. It's pretty readily available on our websites, the Texas Tech websites. And it also says on there, you're welcome to reach out to your direct supervisor or your department administrator, which is what my role is. Yeah. So they know they have a chain, but there's if they're not comfortable, because coming to me may not be totally anonymous. As an institution, we have an OSHA and a HIPAA compliance officer that are completely anonymous, that they can just bypass the department and go straight to.
Okay. Okay. Have they added the initials CJO behind your business card yet?
No, I have not.
For the chief jailable officer, in case there's a HIPAA violation, you get to go to jail?
Yes. I was told early on in my career that an administrator is a expendable position. That if your staff get in too hot of water, you may be the person sacrificed, and likewise, if your chairman or faculty member, in our case, doctor in our department, gets in trouble, you may be the sacrificial lamb. So I took this position on knowing that it's not really a secure position in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I understand. Well, one of the responses for OSHA was that they do nothing for OSHA. Is that person by any chance on the call? And the reason I ask is because their comment is we don't have sharps, meds, biohazard waste, et cetera. But even without that, OSHA still applies. You have risk of falls, or you may have cleaning solutions in your office where if your staff is responsible for like cleaning the restroom, if you're a small practice and don't have a cleaning service, which believe it or not, there are some of them out there, you need to have certain standards just for that. Getting on top of a ladder to change a light bulb at my age, it's not very recommended. You know, we pay somebody like Justin to come change our bulbs because he's younger. He bounces more than I do. So, okay, well,
It's not a matter of if I fall, it's how hard I bounce.
that's it. That's it. So you always find a big person like me to stand by so you at least fall on something soft. Somebody did write in here that this is a weakness of our organization. And you know, the thing about it is that we hear a lot about compliance and the HIPAA police and people like that. And years ago, the joke was there's no such thing as the HIPAA police because it's really you mess up and that's when you get identified. The old thing about several years ago where you give your patient a visit summary and it's got the practice logo on there and the doctor's name and theirs and everything else, and you give it to somebody that walks outside. And then in the Texas, when it's windy, probably like it is up where Justin is, it starts flying around. Next, you ends up at the local TV station parking lot, and somebody goes, "Hey, look, we have this practice that is committing HIPAA because we found this insecure document here." There's kind of an old joke that in times of peace, the FBI spend more time doing audits. And, you know, you just never know when you're going to be audited. It's so important that your staff is trained. It's important to document the training that you have and actually have it available if anybody asks. The worst thing that can happen, I think, is if somebody comes in and they want to do an audit and they ask you for your compliance notebook and it's got dust on it and they can tell that it's never been opened up. You know, I've heard that, and I don't want this to come back and bite me, but sometimes it's better not to have a policy as opposed to have one and you're not using it. And, you know, they can get you for being stupid, but at least, you know, that's different than the other. But it's really important, I think, that for all of our compliance manuals that we review them regularly and even initial and put down the review date and who did the reviewing so that you can have it on there. I've been in practices before where the compliance officer hasn't been there in 10 years. So it kind of makes you wonder how often have they received any type of training. So it's just things to, the old expression, just like in documenting on a patient chart, document. State what you did and then have a copy of it for proof. Does anybody have any questions? This is a quiet crowd.
I did want to add through our internal OSHA compliance officer, they get anxious if you don't have any reports of falls or anything like that. So as an institution, you have your reports of falls, whether it's an employee or a patient or anything like that. And they actually will give you a call if you have too few over the course of some sort of window, because to them, it feels as though you're neglecting turning stuff in or you're encouraging people to hide it. And it just may, or you're not informing them, which is probably the biggest offense. You're not informing your staff and team of where to report those things so they can be followed up on. And so that's something that is equally important, is like you're saying, make sure people are trained. And for us, is make sure they know who to report it to and when is appropriate to report it. And so it doesn't seem as though you're hiding anything, even if you're not intending to.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, it's so important to keep your documentation up. What is that? The 300 or the 301, the OSHA form that you can document incidents. It's computerized now. It's online. You can just update it when you need it. But I agree with you. I mean, if you go a whole 2-3 years without something, I think it is a little suspicious. In San Antonio, we had an email go around recently because somebody had a needle stick. And it's like, what is your procedure for doing that? And I believe it was Monica that said that you have an account with Texas Med Clinic where you send them to, and I've used them too, and they do everything for you. But you still have to put the incident down on that form.
You were asking earlier, Tom, about the 800 anonymous phone number for for sending information in, and we're still a little old school in some ways, and that's why we're looking for different routes to go moving forward. But we have an incident report form that gets completed, and they can choose to be anonymous if they want to. They'll send that to us. We have a quality improvement program, which covers OSHA and HIPAA and those type of things, and we'll delve into it. Depending on what the situation is, whether it's a needle stick or if it's a patient, an employee fall, if there's, other issues or HIPAA incidents that come up, we'll deal with that as well.
Yeah, that's wise. I think it's good to keep records of everything. Well, I've noticed, and I think Betty has noticed this over the last few times too, that the number of people that are participating in the Learn at Lunch seems to be diminishing a little bit. We were doing it every week. We've stretched it to every 2 weeks. And I think from a board standpoint, we're wanting to provide the education that our members need. And if this is something that you feel could be improved, maybe as a different method, those of you that have been with Texas MGMA for a while, several years ago, we used to have periodic webinars throughout the year that you could sign up for. And there was a speaker that would talk for 45 minutes during lunchtime, and you can sit there and listen to them. Is that something that y'all would be interested in having again versus these, quick surveys and then a follow-up too? Yes. Okay. Yeah, we do this in San Antonio. We have a lunch connection, and actually we have one coming up next week with a speaker to talk about negativity in the workplace. And you can see how that can happen right now with everything the way it is with COVID. But Monica and Justin and I, since we're on the board, we can bring this up at a board meeting and just see if it's something to kind of pivot to get a little bit more participation, because as your professional association for the state, we want to provide you the type of information that is important to you. And then the other part of it too is, if a lunchtime meeting is not the best time of day to do it, we could do it at another time of the day. In San Antonio, we have one of our educational seminars that's every other month at 7:30 in the morning. And Jay Hester just said he's interested in speakers as well as these discussions. So that's good to know. It's good to know.
Jay, I sort of said the same thing. I like the speakers. I like something that's sort of passive you can have on and listen to. At the same time, I sort of like the interactivity. Now, this has been a relatively quiet group today, but I like the dialogue that's created when you have a group like this where you can go back and forth. So I'm sort of neutral on if we're forced to pick one or the other. I'm sort of neutral. I like them both. But Jay, I like what you said. I like them both. So I would be fine with having both as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe a possibility would be every other month you do something like this, and then in the odd months you do where you have a speaker that's available to talk to us about an issue. And that's the other thing too. It's like our education conference that we're going to have in May. I think it's important that as a member, if there's a topic that you feel is important that you'd like to hear something on, send an email to Betty Wilkes or somebody on the board to let us know that, hey, this is something we'd like to do, because otherwise what happens is you have a group of people that are on a committee that will come up with solutions that, one, follow the body of knowledge by the American College of Medical Practice Executives, and secondly, it's something that's pertinent to our everyday work. So, we're all smarter when we're all together versus just a few people that are making decisions. I'm reading the chats. I don't know whether y'all are too, but
yeah, I got to chuckle at Jay again because I'm like, yep, 7:30 is way too early for me.
Jay doesn't wake up till noon, so isn't that right, Jay? He's not on to defend himself. He says true, but anyway, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to find something that really helps the membership. With that in mind, I really don't have anything else. I thought that the responses that we had were good. They're kind of self-explanatory. To summarize, a lot of people are using online training and their service providers for the training. I think that anytime you can reduce your costs for training, that it's a plus. There's a lot of organizations that are out there. I don't know whether anybody uses Henry Schein as a medical supply rep, but I know a few years ago when I was in a practice, our representative came and did OSHA training over a lunch break, and he brought lunch to the staff. I mean, that's a really good hit. But anyway, any questions before we close it out for the day, Monica?
No, I was only going to say that the online is great, but I think everybody kind of just, or I'm speaking for ourselves, would defer to that, as opposed to, you have to have somebody that is going to be accountable for this type of program within the organization that can be the go-to, that if somebody were to come into the office, they know what the rules are, and if they know that, you know, we've done something wrong or we haven't, or can answer the questions. I think if somebody walked in right now, everybody would be like, I don't know who that is. And so we've got to do a better job to prepare everybody.
Yeah, I did HIPAA training for staff a couple of years ago, and the person who was not really the practice manager, but the person in charge, emailed me and told me I scared the hell out of everybody and they're afraid to do anything now. And it's like, well, that's good.
Yeah, you did your job.
So it's like, if you want to wear orange the rest of your life, then knock yourself out. So, all righty. Well, thank you all for joining us today. We will get the board. They have a board meeting scheduled for December the 2nd in the afternoon, and this is something we can discuss. But in the meantime, I know that we have canceled the Lunch and Learn for the week of Thanksgiving, because the next one was supposed to be the 24th. And we feel that people will be either unavailable or have other priorities at that time. So the next time I think that the Lunch and Learn is scheduled, unless something changes, would be around December the 1st. But just check your email. And if for some reason you're not getting the emails from Betty, then I would recommend that you check your profile and see what email address you have. A lot of people are starting to use their personal email addresses because there's so many firewalls with big organizations that sometimes it gets held up and it won't get through there. And then the final thing I'll say before I go is, if you have not received your membership dues renewal notice for 2021, there is another batch that have started being sent from Texas MGMA. I heard from one of our board members in San Antonio this morning when we had our board meeting that initially when he clicked on it, he was going to delete it because it didn't look like it was from anybody he knew. And so the emails are coming from a lady named Catherine Peacock. So if you see anything from Texas MGMA, then you may want to click that open and see if it's your dues notice. And that's really all I have today. And just want to wish you all a happy Thanksgiving, since we probably won't see each other until after that. For those of you who have been in the military, like myself, I got my Air Force shirt on today. Tomorrow's Veterans Day. We appreciate what you've done for our country, whether you're currently serving, retired, or even spent 4 years and got out to get the college benefits. But thank you for all you do. And I'm going to go ahead and end it with that. And have a good rest of the day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.